All right, everybody. So first up, we've got Trevor Fetz with Aloft, and he's going to be presenting on avian use in the Middle Rio Grande Bosque from 2004 to 2018.
Okay, I'm going to start by providing some background about our Middle Rio Grande songbird study. Our survey protocol is based on that used by Hink and Omar in the early 1980s Middle Rio Grande Biological Survey. And we also use the same habitat classifications that Robert Omar developed based on community and structure, or CS types. We began avian walking transects in December 2003, and we currently have 81 transects as depicted here by the yellow polygons on the study area map, ranging from Rio Rancho in the north south to La Jolla Wildlife Management Area. So we survey 6 months out of the year, 3 months during the winter, 3 months during the summer. Each transect is surveyed 3 times per month for a total of 9 surveys per season. Bird detections are placed in distance bins relative to the location of that bird, perpendicular to the transect lines. And you can see we potentially record detections out to 122 meters, but for data analysis, I generally only use data collected within 30 meters. The reason for that is that our detection rates rapidly decrease beyond 30 meters, and also the ability of the surveyors to estimate distance rapidly decreases beyond 30 meters. So there are a number of key factors that have influenced avian use in the Bosque over the course of our study. The biggest of those was the long-term exceptional drought that took hold in summer of 2010. And as you'll see in a minute, it had a significantly negative impact on bird use in the Bosque. We've had 8 transects that have been completely consumed by fire during the course of the study. The impact on birds in that, obviously there's a negative impact, but in some cases, for some species, there's been a positive impact. 22 of our transects are in restoration areas where the Army Corps of Engineers has done restoration work, and those date back to 2004. Cumulatively, the habitat improvements from those restoration projects have been beneficial to the avian community. In contrast, there have also been a number of thinning and clearing projects done by a variety of land management entities. These are projects that are based on reducing fuel load and thereby fire danger, but they've had a negative impact on bird use. And then we've also noticed over the course of the study a big increase in human and their dog use in the Bosque, especially in portions of Albuquerque, Corrales, and Rio Rancho. And then finally, there are factors, of course, outside the Bosque that are relevant, such as wintering ground conditions for neotropical migrants that either breed in the Bosque or use the Bosque for migration, and then breeding conditions for species that winter in the Bosque but don't breed here. So this graph shows winter avian density by year through 2019. There's a general trend here, but there's some outliers in the data that I'll get to in a minute. Basically, up until the drought years, winter density was relatively high. The drought hits, and you see a big drop in overall density. The peak of the drought was 2013, and there's an anomaly here I'll explain in a minute. As drought conditions decrease, birds begin to recover up until essentially 2018 and 2019 when we had the new drought that hit. So this abnormally high density number for 2013 is due almost entirely to a huge influx of American crows and European starlings into the Bosque, where we normally get very few of either of those species. And it basically accounts for about, well, half of that data. Other anomalies, you'll notice 2005, 2006, and 2009, our numbers are low. During those winters, we did not have sufficient funding to survey all the transects, and that more than likely impacted our numbers for those winters. And then 2004, we had only established 24 transects for that first winter of surveys, and 2004 also marked the end of a previous drought period. Okay, so summer avian density by year, and this is through 2018. I didn't point this out before, but again, density is presented in terms of mean number of birds per 100 acres. And the trend here is much cleaner. You'll see pre-drought years, very high average density throughout the Bosque. You've got the drop and it bottoms out the worst part of the drought in 2013. And then you see as drought conditions lessen, bird numbers increase up until 2018 when the new drought hit. So to really emphasize the impact that the drought had, I took all the data, combined it together, compared data from the 7 pre-drought years with data from either the 8 or 9 post-drought years. And in terms of both winter and summer density, the letters here indicate significant differences. So as you can see, density year-round in the Bosque has been significantly lower since the drought hit. There just hasn't been a full recovery. Okay, moving on now to cumulative winter avian density, and this is by CS type or habitat type through 2019. Again, any CS types not connected by a common letter, that indicates a significant difference. The key habitat types for wintering birds are these top 5 or 6 right here. So we're looking at all of these. The common theme is that all of these have dense understory vegetation, and this vegetation is generally either dominated by Russian olive of different heights, dense vegetation next to water, drain 5 or marsh 5, and then dense vegetation dominated by native species, primarily New Mexico olive, either under a mature cottonwood canopy or without a mature cottonwood canopy. And I guess real quickly I should go through, for people that don't know the CS classification system, anything, any habitat type with a odd number indicates dense understory. Anything with an even number is more open understory. So at the bottom end, the worst habitats, down here, salt cedar stands, very little use. And then these 2 habitat types that have been subjected to extensive clearing or thinning, open, and then cottonwood 2 artificial. Cottonwood 2 artificial is a mature cottonwood canopy, but the understories have either been cleared or substantially thinned. And by comparison, we have cottonwood 2 natural here. So it's the same general habitat type, but there hasn't been thinning there. And you can see there's a significant difference in winter density between the thinning areas. The other specific habitat types I want to point out are drain 5. Drain 5, that's habitat where there is dense vegetation on the far side of the drain. And by comparison, then drain 6, that's where there's either sparse vegetation or no vegetation at all on the far side of the drain. And you can see the huge difference in density between those 2 types. Okay. Cumulative winter richness by habitat type. And this is presented in terms of the number of species per transect present at a density of 1.5 birds or more per 100 acres. And so this is the same richness measure that Hink and Omart used. And basically what it means is for a species to qualify at, in the richness level, there have to be multiple detections of that species in the given CS type for a specific season. Again, you're going to see the same habitat types support the highest richness during winter that supported the highest density. And this is going to play out again in the next 2 slides as well. And then down at the bottom, we've got the same ones where salt cedar, not much goes on there. And then drain 6, C2 artificial open areas where there's been clearing or thinning that's gone on. And you see significantly lower species richness relative to all other habitat types. And again, drain, especially interesting is how high the richness is with drain 5 compared to drain 6. And that's because birds are coming in to use this for water, but they want cover. If there's no cover, the birds do not stay there. They get in, get out. They really search for the cover. And again, with the cottonwood 2, notice the huge difference in richness between cottonwood 2 artificial and C2 natural. Okay, turning to summer avian density through 2018. And you're looking at the same habitat types in general that support the highest density. Habitat types with dense vegetation adjacent to standing water, dense understory dominated by either New Mexico olive or Russian olive. And then it's the same deal on the bottom. We're looking at the same 4 habitats that really don't support much bird use during the summer. And you can see that the spread of the data is really wide for summer density. There's a lot of significant differences here, but it really drops off once you get to drain 6 habitat, C2 artificial, salt cedar, and open areas. Again, note how low drain 6 is compared to drain 5. And this is actually, this doesn't even represent drain 5 very well. Okay, I gotta move on. But there's a lot of the drain 5 habitat we don't actually collect within 30 meters. So drain 5 would actually be cumulative summer richness, same theme. You don't see a lot of significant differences between most of the habitat types until you get down here. And the real drop off is between C2 natural and C2 artificial, where you're losing, about 6 or 7 species there. And then it's the same poorer habitats that just don't have much richness. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 22 transects that are in areas where the Corps of Engineers conducted restoration, as indicated on the map by the yellow dots. Don't have much time here. I wanted to show you a before and after photo. This is a little extreme. Most of the pre-restoration sites didn't look this open, but this is our transect SC37 before restoration began in the winter of 2011. This is a photo from the same spot in 2017 during a high flow period where the soils were flooded. So I think the improvement of habitat is fairly obvious from those photos. It's not extreme at all the sites, but it gives you an idea of what they've done. So with limited time, what I did was pool the data for 17 of our restoration sites that had similar characteristics, and then compared pre-restoration numbers with post-restoration numbers. Okay. And you can see that there's a significant difference in terms of both winter avian density and winter richness, with the post-restoration numbers being significantly higher. We did the same thing for summer avian use, and for richness, post-restoration, it has been significantly higher. You'll notice though, for summer density, it's essentially a wash. And this is because I don't have the 2019 data in, which is going to push up the post-restoration numbers. But basically, there's been a wide variation between sites. Some of these, the vegetation just hasn't grown very well or hadn't through 2018. It's stunted, it can't support enough birds, while other sites have much higher vegetation. So just a quick summary before I finish. Long-term drought beginning in 2010 had a significantly negative impact that the avian community has not recovered from. Avian use is highest throughout the years in habitats with dense understory vegetation dominated by native vegetation, primarily New Mexico olive, or by a large component of Russian olive, and then dense vegetation next to open water. And then finally, I know everybody hates Russian olive, but the birds really like it, and they utilize it year-round. We've documented at this point 60 species of birds feeding on Russian olive berries throughout the year. It's especially important for migrating and wintering birds, and then breeding birds, especially understory species and sub-canopy species, utilize it heavily for nesting. And if there's any time left.
Real quick, the Russian olive is really interesting. Real quick, yeah, the Russian olive is really interesting. I'm curious about Siberian elm. What kind of utilization?
Siberian elm, birds don't seem to use it much, and we don't have real, with mature Siberian elms, it's hard to tell, but we just have not documented a lot of use by birds in Siberian elm, either as a nesting substrate or really in terms of what.
Is it the severity of the burn?
A couple of them, especially on Sandia Pueblo, we were looking at within our survey areas 100% consumption of existing vegetation. So essentially nothing left. But the key with the burns is the retention of cottonwood snags afterwards, which brings the birds back in and is really important to cavity nesters. And so in a lot of these sites, we've seen bird numbers kick up really quickly after catastrophic fires, simply because of the cavities available for nesting. And then the weeds move in. Some of these sites we've had quick turnaround in terms of vegetation regrowing, and it brings in understory species.
I wondered if you were able to look at in the different groupings, like number of common birds versus more rare birds, as well as like exotic species versus the natives.
Yeah, as far as exotics, we get, there's certain areas get a lot of starlings during the winter. We get almost no house sparrows, and we don't get rock pigeons. And so those are the three main non-native species. Everything else is native. More uncommon species, we generally detect them in the denser habitat types. Yes.
You mentioned briefly the impact potentially of these areas used in parks and for walking and wildlife. Can you speak to that?
Right, and so it's the off-leash dogs that are really probably the big issue, but just the overall disturbance with having more people in the Bosque. Obviously, there's nothing that can really be done about that, want people out in the Bosque, but it clearly impact, especially understory birds and their densities in habitat types. They're the same habitat type, but if we compare those to where there's heavy human use to areas, more rural areas of the same habitat type, we see a big difference in the bird numbers.